You ever have an idea so good it scares people? Lily Carter didn't mean to say it out loud, but the words slipped from her lips just as the ceramic mug hit the counter a little too hard, the sharp clink cutting through the soft hum of espresso machines and quiet morning chatter, and just like that the entire cafe seemed to pause for half a second too long, long enough for her manager to turn, arms crossed, eyes already narrowed in that familiar way that meant trouble. The kind that didn't shout but still made your chest tighten. Lily, we don't pay you to reinvent the business, he said flatly, his voice low but edged, the kind of tone that felt heavier than yelling, and a couple seated by the window glanced over before quickly looking back at their lattes, pretending not to listen, while Lily stood there in her worn apron, fingers still curled around the towel she'd been using to wipe down the counter, her cheeks warming, not from embarrassment exactly, but from that quiet frustration that had been building for months, maybe years. The feeling of seeing things differently in a place that didn't want different. I was just saying if we changed the morning flow, maybe added a grab-and-go system, we could double the line speed, she tried, softer this time, like maybe if she lowered her voice, the idea would sound smaller, less threatening, but her manager just shook his head, already dismissing her before she finished. We sell coffee, Lily, not million-dollar ideas, he muttered, turning away as if that ended the conversation, as if that ended her. And for a second she just stood there, staring at the steam rising from the machines, at the reflection of herself in the stainless steel, the loose strands of hair escaping her ponytail, the faint crease in her uniform that never quite ironed out, the kind of details that reminded her exactly where she stood in the world, exactly how far she was from anything resembling $1 million. And that was when the bell above the door chimed softly, almost lost in the noise, and a man stepped in, quiet, unassuming, dressed in a simple dark jacket that had seen better days but still fit him just right, like he didn't care how it looked, only that it worked, his eyes scanning the room briefly before settling, not on the menu, not on the pastry case, but on her, just for a moment longer than normal, the kind of look that wasn't intrusive, just aware, like he had actually heard what she said, like he hadn't dismissed it in the same breath. And Lily quickly looked away, grabbing a fresh cup, slipping back into routine because routine was safe. Routine didn't get you in trouble. What can I get started for you? She asked, voice steady, professional, as if nothing had just happened, as if she hadn't just been told her ideas didn't belong here. The man stepped closer, hands in his pockets, and for a second he didn't answer, just glanced at the register, then back at her, a faint smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. Just coffee, he said simply. But there was something about the way he said it, like the words carried more weight than they should have. Like he wasn't just ordering a drink, like he was waiting, listening, and Lily nodded, turning to pour, unaware that behind that simple request stood Ethan Cole, a billionaire who had walked into hundreds of cafes without remembering a single face, but in this moment, in this small place that smelled like burnt espresso and second chances, he wasn't thinking about coffee at all. The coffee dripped slowly into the paper cup, dark and steady, and Lily kept her eyes on it longer than necessary, as if focusing on something simple might quiet the noise still echoing in her head, the words her manager had thrown at her lingering like a bad taste she could not quite wash away. But then she felt it again, that quiet presence on the other side of the counter, not impatient, not distracted, just there. And when she finally slid the cup across, their fingers almost brushed but did not quite meet. That will be $3.50, she said, her voice returning to its practiced rhythm, the one that kept everything safe and predictable. The man reached into his pocket, pulling out a few worn bills, placing them neatly on the counter without counting twice, as if the exact amount did not matter to him, and then instead of stepping away, like most customers did, he stayed, lifting the cup but not drinking, his gaze drifting briefly toward the layout of the cafe, the line forming behind him, the narrow space where customers shuffled awkwardly while waiting, the single register that bottlenecked everything during the morning rush, and then back to her. You really think you could double the line speed? He asked, casually, like he was asking about the weather, but something in his tone made the question feel heavier, like it mattered more than it should have. Lily blinked, caught off guard. Her first instinct was to brush it off, to say it was nothing, because that was easier, because that was what people expected from someone in her position, but then she hesitated, just for a second, because he had asked, because he had not laughed, because he had listened. It is not that complicated, she said finally, lowering her voice slightly as another customer stepped up beside him. Most people order the same thing every morning, but we treat every order like it is brand new. If we preset the top 5 items and shift the register flow, we could move people through twice as fast without making them feel rushed. She paused, glancing toward her manager who was now busy restocking cups, then back at the man. And if we added a mobile pickup shelf right there, she nodded subtly toward an unused corner near the window, we could cut wait times even more. She let out a small breath, almost like she had said too much already, like she had crossed an invisible line. But the man did not interrupt, did not correct her, he just listened, really listened, his expression thoughtful in a way that made her words feel real. What would that cost? He asked, and this time there was no mistaking it. This was not small talk. Lily frowned slightly, doing the math instinctively. Not much, maybe a few $1,000s to rearrange equipment and update the system. But it would pay for itself in a few weeks if traffic increases like I think it would. She shrugged lightly, trying to downplay it again. It is just an idea, she added quickly, as if to protect herself from being dismissed a second time. But the man shook his head, almost imperceptibly. No, he said quietly, taking his first sip of coffee, his eyes never leaving hers. That is not just an idea. There was a brief pause, the kind that stretched just enough to make her wonder what he would say next. That is a missed opportunity. Lily felt something shift in her chest, small but undeniable, like a door cracking open just a little, and before she could respond, her manager's voice cut through again from the back, sharper this time. Lily, less talking, more working, and just like that the moment snapped, the noise rushed back in, the line moved forward, and the man stepped aside, but not before placing something else on the counter, a receipt, folded once, as if it meant nothing at all. Keep thinking like that, he said, almost to himself, before turning toward the door, leaving behind more than just the faint scent of coffee. And Lily stared at the folded paper for a second longer than she should have, unaware that in that small, ordinary moment, something had already begun to change. The receipt stayed exactly where he had left it, just beside the register, slightly curled at the edge like any other piece of paper that would usually end up in the trash by the end of a shift. But for some reason Lily did not move it, not right away. She finished the next order, then the next, the rhythm of the morning rush pulling her back into motion, cups sliding, milk steaming, names called out over the low buzz of conversation. And yet every few seconds her eyes flickered back to that small folded square, as if it carried more weight than it should have, as if ignoring it would mean missing something she could not quite name. And when the line finally thinned and her manager disappeared into the back again, she reached for it, fingers hesitating for just a moment before unfolding the paper carefully, expecting maybe a phone number, or a quick note, something simple, but instead she found lines, quick but precise handwriting covering the blank space on the back, arrows, small sketches, annotations that looked surprisingly familiar, her breath catching slightly as she recognized her own idea, but refined, expanded, pushed further than she had dared to think out loud. He had mapped the entire flow, customer entry, order point, pickup station, even suggested repositioning the pastry case to guide movement naturally, and in the corner, written smaller but sharper, was a single line, time is the product, coffee is the excuse. Lily blinked, reading it again, slower this time, the word settling in her chest in a way that felt both thrilling and unsettling. Because it was true, because it was exactly what she had been trying to say but had never found the words for. And for a second the cafe around her faded into the background, the clinking, the chatter, the hum, all of it dimmed as her mind raced ahead, imagining it, seeing it, the faster lines, the smoother flow, the way customers would move without even thinking about it. And then just as quickly doubt crept in, the same familiar voice that always followed her ideas, telling her it was too much, too ambitious, too far beyond someone like her. She folded the receipt again, tighter this time, as if containing the thought might make it safer, and slipped it into the small pocket of her apron just as her coworker Jess leaned over the counter with a curious smile. You look like you just solved a mystery, she teased lightly. Lily shook her head quickly, forcing a small laugh. Just a customer note, she said, brushing it off, but Jess raised an eyebrow, not entirely convinced. Must have been some customer, she replied, glancing toward the door where the man had already disappeared, leaving no trace except that piece of paper and a feeling Lily could not quite shake. The rest of the shift passed in a blur, but something had changed. Every movement now felt slightly off, like she was suddenly aware of every inefficiency, every delay, every moment where things could be better but were not. And by the time her shift ended, the sun already dipping lower outside the window, she untied her apron slowly, fingers lingering on the pocket where the receipt rested, as if it were something fragile, something important. Stepping out into the cool evening air, the noise of the cafe replaced by the distant hum of traffic and the soft glow of Streetlights flickering on one by one, she pulled the paper out again, unfolding it under the amber light, reading the words once more, and this time she noticed something she had missed before, a small set of numbers written at the bottom, not labeled, not explained, just there, clean and deliberate, and for a moment she stared at it, heart beating just a little faster, wondering if it was what she thought it was. Wondering if this was more than just a passing conversation, more than just a stranger who had listened, and as she stood there on the sidewalk, the city moving around her, she realized something quietly but clearly. This was the first time someone had not just heard her idea, but had seen it, truly seen it, and somehow, that changed everything. She did not call the number that night, not because she did not want to, but because something about it felt too important to rush, like once she crossed that line there would be no going back to the quiet routine she had always known. So instead Lily folded the receipt again, smoothing the edges carefully before placing it beside her small notebook on the nightstand. The same notebook filled with half-formed ideas and sketches that had never made it past her own imagination, and for a long time she just sat there on the edge of her bed, staring at the two objects side by side, one representing everything she had been, the other hinting at something she could become, and sometime after midnight, without fully deciding, she reached for her notebook and began to write, faster than she ever had before, refining, expanding, questioning every detail of the flow, the customer journey, the hidden friction points she had ignored for months, and for the first time it did not feel like daydreaming. It felt like building something real, something that could exist beyond the walls of that small cafe, and by the time the early light crept through her window, her pen finally slowed, her hand aching but her mind sharper than it had been in years, the receipt still there beside her, waiting. The next morning the cafe was already busy when she arrived, the familiar smell of coffee grounding her as she tied her apron, but everything looked different now. Every movement, every delay stood out like it had been highlighted, and when the bell above the door chimed again, her eyes lifted instinctively, her heart reacting before her mind could catch up, and there he was, the same man, the same quiet presence, stepping in like he had never really left, except this time Lily did not look away. This time she held his gaze for just a second longer, enough to acknowledge that something had changed between them, even if neither of them said it out loud. He approached the counter, hands resting lightly against the edge. "Just coffee?" she asked, a small hint of a smile breaking through despite herself, and he returned it, almost amused. "Only if you still think it is just coffee," he replied, and something about the way he said it made her laugh softly, the tension from the day before easing just a little. She handed him his cup, but this time she did not retreat immediately. Instead she reached into her apron and pulled out the folded receipt, placing it gently on the counter between them. "You forgot this," she said, watching his reaction carefully. He glanced down at it, then back at her, his expression unreadable for a moment, before he shook his head slightly. "No," he said, calm and certain, "I left it." Lily felt that same shift again, stronger this time, like a step forward into something unknown. "Then what is the number?" she asked, her voice quieter now, not afraid, just cautious. "And for the first time," he paused, as if considering how much to reveal, his fingers tapping lightly against the cup before he answered. "That depends," he said, meeting her eyes directly. "What are you going to do with the idea?" The question lingered in the air between them, heavier than anything he had said before, and Lily hesitated, not because she did not know the answer, but because saying it out loud would make it real, would mean admitting that she wanted more than this, more than the safety of being overlooked, more than the comfort of small expectations. She took a breath, steadying herself. "I would build it," she said finally, simple, honest, and for a moment the noise of the cafe seemed to fade again, the line behind him, the machines, the voices, all of it dimmed as he studied her, not like a customer, not like a stranger, but like someone measuring something deeper, something that could not be seen at a glance. And then he nodded, just once, a small movement that carried more weight than any words. "Good," he said quietly, lifting his coffee. "Because ideas are easy," he added, turning slightly toward the door. "Building them is what changes everything." And with that he stepped away again, leaving Lily standing there, the receipt still between her fingers, her world no longer as small as it had been just a day ago. The rest of the day moved differently after that, not because anything around Lily had changed, but because she had. Every order she took, every step between the espresso machine and the counter felt sharper, more intentional, like she was seeing the system from above instead of being trapped inside it. And by mid-afternoon she had already filled 3 pages in her notebook during the small moments between customers, refining the flow again and again, questioning assumptions she had never dared to challenge before, until finally Jess leaned over, peeking at the scribbles with a curious grin. "You are doing it again," she said, tapping the notebook lightly, planning to run the place by next week. Lily let out a small breath, closing the notebook halfway. "Something like that," she replied, but her voice carried a quiet seriousness that made Jess tilt her head slightly, studying her more closely. "Okay, what happened?" she asked, softer now, and Lily hesitated, glancing toward the door as if expecting him to walk back in at any moment. "I met someone," she said finally, and even as she said it, it sounded too simple, too small for what she was actually feeling. Jess raised an eyebrow. Immediately, a teasing smile forming. "Oh really? And he talks business strategy over coffee," she joked, but Lily did not laugh this time. Instead she opened the notebook again, turning it toward Jess, revealing the sketch of the cafe layout, the arrows, the timing notes, the small details that transformed something ordinary into something efficient. Something intentional, and Jess's expression shifted, the humor fading into something closer to surprise. "Wait, this is actually kind of brilliant," she admitted, tracing one of the arrows with her finger. "Why are we not doing this already?" Lily gave a small shrug, though her chest tightened slightly at the familiar answer. "Because it is not my place," she said, the words quieter now, but Jess shook her head almost immediately. "Says who?" she shot back, and for a moment Lily did not have an answer, because that was the question, was not it? Who decided what her place was? Who decided that her ideas stopped at the counter? The thought lingered longer than it should have, settling somewhere deeper than before, and by the time her shift ended, she knew she could not ignore it anymore. The receipt still folded carefully in her pocket felt heavier now, not like a question, but like an invitation. Stepping outside into the cool evening air again, the sky painted in soft shades of orange and fading blue, Lily walked a few steps down the block before stopping, her fingers already reaching for the paper, unfolding it slowly as if the number might disappear if she moved too quickly. She stared at it for a long moment, her mind racing through every possible outcome, every reason why she should not call, every fear that told her she was stepping into something too big, too uncertain, and yet beneath all of that, there was something else, quieter but stronger, the same feeling she had when she first started writing the idea, the sense that this was not just about opportunity, it was about being seen, being heard. She took a breath, steady and deliberate, then pulled out her phone, her thumb hovering over the screen for just a second before she dialed, each ring stretching longer than it should have, until finally the line clicked, and his voice came through, calm, familiar. "I was wondering when you would call," he said, and Lily felt a small, unexpected smile form, despite the nerves still tightening in her chest. "I almost did not," she admitted honestly, glancing down at the receipt still in her hand, "but I think I need to know what happens if I do." There was a brief pause on the other end, not hesitation, but consideration, like he was weighing something carefully, and then he spoke again, his tone slightly different now, more focused, more intentional. "Then let me ask you something," he said. "If someone gave you the chance to prove your idea works, not in theory, but in real life, would you take it?" Lily closed her eyes for just a moment, the sounds of the city fading around her, her heartbeat louder than anything else, and when she opened them again, the answer felt clearer than it ever had before. "Yes," she said, not louder, not stronger, just certain. And on the other end of the line, Ethan Cole smiled, though she could not see it, because for the first time in a long time, he had found something more valuable than any business deal. Someone who did not just have an idea, but the courage to follow it. The next morning did not feel like any other morning Lily had ever walked into, even though the cafe looked exactly the same hum of machines, the same faint scent of roasted beans lingering in the air, the same worn edges of the counter she had wiped 1,000 times before. But something inside her had shifted overnight, something quiet but undeniable, and as she tied her apron, her fingers paused for just a second over the pocket where the folded receipt had been, now replaced by something else, a sense of direction she had never carried into this space before. And when the bell above the door chimed, her eyes lifted instinctively again, but this time it was not Ethan who walked in, it was her manager, earlier than usual, his expression sharper, more focused, like he had already decided something before the day had even begun. "Lily, I need to talk to you," he said, not unkindly, but not casually either, and for a brief second her chest tightened, that old familiar fear rising again, the fear of being told she had crossed a line she was not supposed to see. She followed him toward the back, the noise of the cafe fading slightly as the door swung closed behind them. "I heard you were giving suggestions again," he said, folding his arms, his tone measured but firm, and Lily felt the words settle. Heavier than they should have, not because they were new, but because this time she was different. This time she did not immediately shrink back. "I was just trying to help," she replied, steady, even if her heartbeat was not. He sighed, shaking his head slightly. "This is not your responsibility," he said, the same sentence she had heard in different forms her entire life, and for a moment she almost accepted it again. Almost nodded and stepped back into the safe version of herself, but then she remembered the question from the night before, the one that had not left her mind. Would you take the chance? And something in her refused to step backward this time. "Maybe it should be," she said quietly, the words surprising even her as they left her mouth. Her manager blinked, caught off guard, as if he had not expected resistance. "Excuse me," he asked, and Lily held his gaze, not defiant, not aggressive, just certain. "I see things here every day that could be better," she continued, her voice calm but clear, "and I know I am just a waitress, but that does not mean I am wrong." The silence that followed felt longer than it actually was, the kind of silence where something shifts, even if no one says it out loud. Her manager exhaled slowly, rubbing the back of his neck as if deciding how much to push back. "Look, I appreciate the effort, but this is not how things work," he said finally, softer now, almost tired, and Lily nodded slightly. Because she understood, she had always understood, the system, the structure, the unspoken rules about who got to decide and who did not, but for the first time, understanding it did not mean accepting it. "I know," she said, stepping back toward the door, her hand resting lightly on the handle. "That is exactly the problem," and with that she opened it, stepping back into the noise of the cafe, but this time it did not feel like noise. It felt like a place she was already starting to outgrow. The rest of her shift passed with a strange kind of clarity, every inefficiency confirming what she already knew, every delay reinforcing the idea she had been building, and just before her break, her phone buzzed softly in her pocket, a message lighting up the screen from an unknown number, but she already knew who it was. 3 o'clock. Corner of 5th and Maple. "Come ready." Lily stared at the message for a moment, her pulse quickening slightly, not from fear, but from anticipation, from the sense that whatever came next would not be small, would not be safe, and as she slipped her phone back into her pocket, her fingers brushing against the edge of her notebook, she realized something quietly but clearly. She was no longer waiting for permission, she was stepping into something she had already chosen. At exactly 2:58, Lily stood on the corner of 5th and Maple, her fingers wrapped tightly around the strap of her bag, the city moving around her in its usual rhythm, cars passing, footsteps echoing on the sidewalk, conversations blending into a distant hum, and yet everything felt slightly louder, sharper, like her senses were trying to keep up with the weight of the moment she had stepped into. She checked the time again even though she knew she was early, her mind replaying every possible version of what might happen next, every scenario from a simple conversation to something far bigger than she was ready for. And when a black car pulled up smoothly to the curb in front of her, she barely noticed at first, not until the door opened and a man stepped out, not Ethan, but someone else, dressed in a tailored suit that spoke of a different world entirely, his posture straight, his expression professional but not unkind. "Lily Carter?" he asked, and for a second she hesitated, her name sounding different coming from someone like him, but she nodded, yes, her voice steady even as her thoughts raced. The man gave a small nod in return, opening the rear door of the car with a quiet gesture. "Mr. Cole is expecting you," he said, and that was the moment everything shifted, not gradually, not subtly, but all at once, because until now, Ethan had just been a man in a cafe, someone who listened, someone who asked questions, but this was something else entirely. Lily glanced at the car, then back at the man, a dozen questions rising at once, but none of them finding their way out. Because something deeper told her that asking now would not change what came next, so instead she took a breath and stepped forward, sliding into the seat, the door closing softly behind her, sealing her into a space that felt quiet, controlled, completely different from anything she was used to. The drive was not long, but it felt longer, every turn pulling her further away from the version of her life she had known, until the car finally slowed, stopping in front of a building that rose higher than anything around it, glass and steel reflecting the afternoon light in a way that made it almost impossible to look at directly. Lily stepped out slowly, her gaze lifting upward, taking in the scale of it, the kind of place she had only ever seen from a distance, and for a moment she wondered if she had made a mistake, if she had stepped into something she could not step back from. But before doubt could settle, The man beside her gestured toward the entrance, and she moved forward. Each step echoing slightly against the polished floor as the doors opened, the interior just as precise as the outside, clean lines, quiet conversations, people moving with purpose, and suddenly she was aware of herself again, of her simple clothes, her worn shoes, the small details that marked the difference between her world and this one. But then she saw him, standing near the far end of the lobby, no longer the man in the worn jacket, but something else entirely, dressed in a perfectly fitted suit, his presence commanding in a way that made people naturally step aside as he moved, and yet when his eyes found hers, that same quiet recognition returned, the same calm awareness that had been there from the beginning, as if nothing essential had changed at all. Lily slowed for just a second, her breath catching as the realization settled fully for the first time. This was who he really was, not just someone who understood her idea, but someone who had the power to make it real. Ethan stepped closer, his expression steady, unreadable to anyone else, but not to her. Not anymore. You made it, he said simply, and Lily let out a small breath she had not realized she was holding. You did not mention this part, she replied, her voice softer now, not accusing, just honest, and for a brief moment, something almost like a smile touched his expression, subtle but there. Would you have come if I had? He asked, and Lily paused, the question settling between them, before she shook her head slightly, a small, almost reluctant smile forming. Probably not, she admitted, and Ethan nodded once, as if that was exactly the answer he had expected, before gesturing toward the elevators behind him. Then it worked, he said quietly, and as the doors opened, Lily realized she was no longer stepping into a possibility, she was stepping into a reality she had never imagined, one where everything she believed about her place in the world was about to be tested in ways she could not yet see. The elevator doors closed with a soft, almost silent glide, sealing Lily into a space that felt too still compared to the rush inside her chest, and as the numbers above the door began to climb, she became acutely aware of everything she had not noticed before, the faint reflection of herself in the polished metal walls, the slight crease in her sleeve, the way she held her bag just a little tighter than necessary, and beside her, Ethan stood with a calm that felt almost effortless, as if this world, this height, this perspective was something he moved through every day without thinking, and yet he did not look at the floor numbers, he looked at her, not in a way that pressured, but in a way that waited, giving her space to catch up to what was happening. You look like you are trying to decide if this is real, he said quietly, and Lily let out a small breath, almost a laugh but not quite. I am trying to decide if I belong here, she replied honestly, her voice softer now, stripped of the protective tone she used at the cafe. Ethan tilted his head slightly, considering her words for a moment before responding. Belonging is not a place, he said, his tone steady, it is a decision. The elevator slowed, the numbers stopping, and when the doors opened, Lily stepped out into a space that felt nothing like the lobby below, quieter, more controlled, the kind of environment where every detail had been chosen deliberately, from the lighting to the arrangement of furniture, and beyond the glass walls, the city stretched out beneath them, smaller now, distant in a way that made everything feel both powerful and fragile at the same time. Ethan walked ahead, not rushing, but certain, and Lily followed, each step grounding her just a little more, until they reached a large conference room where a small group of people already sat, their conversations lowering as soon as he entered, their attention shifting toward him instinctively, and then toward her, curiosity flickering in their expressions, subtle but unmistakable. Ethan did not introduce her immediately, instead he moved to the head of the table, placing his hands lightly against the surface as if anchoring the moment. This is Lily Carter, he said simply, his voice carrying just enough authority to quiet the room completely. She is going to show you something you missed. The words hung in the air, unexpected, bold, and Lily felt every pair of eyes turn toward her fully now, the weight of it pressing in, not hostile, but demanding, asking without words what she could possibly offer that they had not already considered, and for a brief second doubt surged again, sharp and familiar, the same voice that had always told her to step back, to stay within the lines. But then she remembered the receipt, the sketches, the late night where the idea had become something real, and without thinking too much about it, she stepped forward, placing her notebook on the table, opening it to the pages she had rewritten again and again. Your problem is not coffee, she began, her voice steady despite everything, echoing the line she had read the night before. It is time. The room remained silent, but it was a different kind of silence now, focused, attentive, and Lily continued, explaining the flow, the bottlenecks, the missed opportunities hidden in plain sight. her hands moving slightly as she spoke, pointing to the diagrams, connecting ideas in a way that felt natural, unforced, as if she had been preparing for this moment far longer than she realized, and as she spoke, something shifted again, not just inside her, but in the room itself, the subtle change in posture, the way people leaned in just a little, the way skepticism gave way to consideration, and when she finally stopped, the silence returned, heavier this time, not empty, but full, and Ethan watched it all without interrupting, his gaze steady, knowing exactly what was happening, because this was not just about the idea anymore. This was about her proving that she belonged not because of where she came from, but because of what she could see. And as the first voice finally spoke up, asking a question not to dismiss but to understand, Lily realized something quietly but powerfully. This was the moment everything changed, not because someone gave her a chance, but because she took it. The question that followed did not come with skepticism, it came with precision, one of the executives leaning forward slightly, fingers steepled as he studied the diagram in front of him. If this increases flow speed by 40%, what happens to order accuracy during peak hours? And Lily did not hesitate this time, not because she had memorized an answer, but because she understood the system. It improves, she said simply, pointing to a section of her notes, because right now your staff is reacting, not anticipating. If you structure the top 5 orders into a pre-configured workflow, you remove decision fatigue and reduce mistakes. There was a brief pause, then another voice, then another, each question sharper, more specific, but instead of shrinking, Lily leaned into it, answering, adapting, thinking in real time, and slowly the room shifted fully, not just listening now, but engaging, testing her idea the way real ideas are tested. And when the final question faded, the silence that followed felt different again, not uncertain, but settled, as if something had quietly clicked into place. Ethan finally moved, stepping forward slightly, his gaze sweeping across the room before returning to her. "Implement it," he said, the words calm but final, and just like that, the decision was made, no vote, no hesitation, just trust, and Lily felt it land, not as relief, but as something deeper, recognition. The kind she had been searching for without realizing it. The meeting dissolved soon after, conversations breaking into smaller groups, plans already forming, but Lily remained where she was for a moment, her notebook still open on the table, her mind catching up to what had just happened, and when she finally looked up, Ethan was there again, closer now, without the distance of the room between them. "You did not just present an idea," he said, his voice quieter now, more personal. "You changed how they think." Lily let out a small breath, her fingers brushing lightly against the edge of the notebook. "I almost did not come," she admitted, and Ethan nodded slightly, as if he already knew. "Most people would not have," he replied. There was a pause, not uncomfortable, but real, the kind where words mattered more because they were chosen. "Why me?" Lily asked then, the question she had been holding back finally finding its way out, not defensive, just honest, and Ethan considered it for a moment before answering, his gaze steady. "Because you did not try to impress me," he said, "you tried to fix something." The simplicity of it settled between them, heavier than anything more complicated could have been, and for a moment neither of them spoke, the city stretching out beyond the glass behind them. A reminder of how small moments could lead to something much larger. Ethan reached into his pocket then, pulling out something small, familiar, unfolding it carefully before placing it on the table between them. The receipt, the same one that had started everything, now smoothed out, preserved in a way that made it feel different, more intentional. "Do you know why I kept this?" he asked, and Lily shook her head slightly, her eyes fixed on the paper. "Because this is where you were not afraid to think bigger," he said, his voice steady. "Before anyone told you not to." Lily felt something shift again, deeper this time, something that was not just about opportunity, but about being understood in a way she had never experienced before. Ethan leaned back slightly, giving her space again, but not distance. "The pilot starts next week," he added. "You will lead it." The words landed quietly, but their meaning was anything but small. Lily blinked, processing. "Lead it," she repeated, and he nodded once. "You built it, you lead it," he said simply, no hesitation, no doubt, and for a moment the weight of it pressed in, the responsibility, the scale, the reality of stepping into something she had never done before, but instead of fear taking over, something else rose to meet it. The same certainty she had felt when she said yes on the phone. "Okay," she said, not louder, not stronger, just ready. Ethan watched her for a second longer, then smiled, not the distant, controlled smile of a businessman, but something quieter, more genuine. Good, he said, and as Lily looked down at the receipt one more time, now no longer just a piece of paper but a symbol of where everything had begun, she realized something that felt both simple and profound. He may have come in for coffee, but what he found, what they both found, was something far more valuable, not just an idea worth millions, but a connection built on seeing each other clearly, and that was something no system could ever replicate.